I often feel like I am doing a horrible job of expressing all of the things that I've come across. And I want everyone to understand that when I say things like, I remember hearing that from here or there, that I am usually citing a reputable source. And if I think it's not, then I will try to be clear that I am speculating. And this video is going to be a good example of that. Honestly, I know how my mind works, and it's just like, I just drove a very long ways, hundreds of miles, many different roads, many different towns. I don't remember the names of any towns, but I remember how to get back to each and every one of them. That's just how my mind works. I'm very visual, and proper nouns and things like that aren't what sticks with me. But in this video, I'm finally going to be able to point out some of those things where I've been saying, okay, I remember hearing this here and hearing that there, and being able to elaborate on that a little bit better. Sometimes it's months before I find another puzzle piece, and it's usually on a completely different subject. That's why you guys see me jumping from subjects all the time, because there's blanks I'm trying to fill in. So let's start with Traditional Cosmology, book number 4, The Global Mythology of Cosmic Creation. And it says, one or more disruptive events concurrently or sequentially bring the world to ruin, including a collapse of the sky, earthquakes, darkness, wind, fire, lightning, flood, and the appearance of a snake or dragon. That's another one of those things that I've heard in many different cases. The catastrophes exterminate or punish an evil or inadequate race of beings. Alternatively, they feature against a backdrop of cosmic battle. A deluge of blood occurs. Mountains, islands, rivers, and lakes are formed during the disruptions, sometimes through the agency of a snake or dragon. This is usually a lit up thing in the sky. It's usually like you've all heard of a fire breathing dragon. There's usually lights associated with this thing in the sky. One of the most momentous episodes in the mythology of origins is the demise of the original configuration of the cosmos, heralding the termination of Illud Tempus, or the paradoxical age of the gods. Now, what he just said there was a different configuration of the cosmos. The planets used to be different in different ages before us. This is referenced many times in anthropological records. Traditions concerning a universal disaster that transpired at a distant time in cosmic history occupy a prominent place in the world's mythology. A recurrent trait in such traditions is a near complete eradication of the life forms then supposed to have existed. While according to numerous accounts, the upheaval affected both sky and earth, the emphasis tends to be on the havoc wreaked on the location identified in mythology as the first land or earth. The material can be artificially divided into categories corresponding to the types of catastrophe involved, such as quaking of the earth or sky, collapse of the sky, darkness and excessive manifestations of the elements, such as wind, fire, and lightning, and water or flood. Examples of some of these are supplied in the following. Collapse of the sky. As seen, the sky was universally viewed as a solid structure. Reports of the fall of the sky make most sense against this background. For example, the Polynesians of Samoa say that the old heavens fell down and that people had to crawl about like the lower animals. And the Bella Coola, central coast of British Columbia, envisioned such an event in terms of fragmentation. Their mythology holds there are 24 guardians appointed to take care of the sky. They are called Nexolaka, or something like that. According to tradition, the sky must be continually fed with firewood. Once upon a time, they put too much firewood into the sky and made it burst. All the pieces except one fell down to the earth. The fragments hit the faces of the 24 guardians and distorted them. I hope everyone understands that sky watching has been an important part of every culture in history. So when I hear about the 24 guardians in the sky, what I'm thinking is our 12 signs of the zodiac, only in a different age, and they had it divided up into 24 on the celestial wheel. And according to their tradition, the sky must be fed with firewood. When they put too much in, the sky exploded. It scarred, or it evidently messed up those other 24 guardians in the sky, but one piece stayed up there, called Selo Wasim, doing the best I can with these pronunciations. And so it sounds like there was one new star in the sky after this event as well. All right, let's jump over to William Sullivan's The Secret of the Incas, where we have another problem with the sun scorching everything here on Earth. One time the sun fell out of the sky, and this so touched the heart of Mokobe that he managed to put it back up and tie it in place so that it wouldn't fall back down. The same thing happened to the sky, but the ingenious and robust Mokobe hoisted it back up on the ends of poles and reattached it to the axis. The sun fell a second time, either because its moorings were not sturdy enough or because time had weakened its strength. And so the time came when inundations of fire burned everything and consumed trees, plants, animals, and men. A few Mokobe, to save themselves, plunged to the bottom of the rivers and lakes and turned themselves into caballeros, or caimans. But two of them, husband and wife, sought asylum in top of a very high tree, from where they watched flow rivers of fire which flooded the surface of the earth. Now, I will point out that the Incas also have a flood myth, to where their ancestors, it was more than two, but they hid in the cave Pacaratambo. And they also say that when they came out, they were holding a rod, like a metal rod, and they somehow had instructions. I'm not clear on exactly how they got these instructions, but whenever they dropped the rod, if it sank into the earth, then that was a good place to settle. So it's kind of a way of testing the soil, it seems like. And, you know, if the soil is good, then the rod's going to sink down in it. But that's what their tradition holds. Now, what you're seeing on the screen here is called a intihuatana, which literally means for tying the sun. And there are thousands of these scattered all about Peru. I remember when I first started this channel, quite a few people had said, what would you do to warn future generations if we were going through one of these catastrophic events? You know, you're going to write it in a book to where it's going to deteriorate. So there are thousands of these all through Peru. And also, what is said here about the cycles of this by Mr. Sullivan, and I do want to read his credentials here. He holds a Bachelor of Arts from Harvard College and a doctorate from the Center of American Indian Studies at the University of St. Andrews. Guys, I really do try to base my way of thinking and theories off of much more than just movies, but the Great Conjunction in The Dark Crystal did come to mind a lot faster than I could find it in this 500-page book here. So let me read what this very accoladed anthropologist has to say about great conjunctions and their cycles. He says the number 40 corresponds to the number of conjunctions of Saturn and Jupiter composing a world age. Guys, a conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter happens every 20 years. And he very clearly says that they say 40 of these cycles composes a world age. And in many of the Native American cultures, they hold that we have been through several ages, just like the Inca and the other civilizations pointed out that one age got destroyed by fire, another age has been destroyed by a deluge. Now, as I've pointed out in another video, I will put this out several times, is we have catastrophes on record in Europe and in China in the 1300s, 1350s, that general time frame, and then back in 500, 550 AD. Actually, the exact dates on that one were 550 for the Justinian comet, earthquakes, plagues, all the same deals as 1350s. In the Americas, though, when you get to the dating of the Incans, they say it is 1450 and 650, exactly 100 years off. So I hope everybody understands how comparative histories work, where they're just comparing one history to another to see how it lines up. And it seems to me like they have the comparative histories of the Americas off by 100 years. I can only do one video at a time, but I will get the video out about the 1300s and show that it was worldwide at that time, and that it didn't skip South America only and hit every other country with earthquakes and plagues and, rapidly shifting climate patterns. Or I don't know, maybe I'm the only one that sees that. Does that seem right, that it would skip South America for 100 years? Anyway, a common motif is the former destruction of the world by means of fire or lightning, typically claimed to have occurred at a primordial time when darkness still prevailed and the current alternation of day and night had not yet been instituted. So they're talking about a time before day and night. In Borosius' rendition of the Babylonian creation myth, the monsters engendered in the womb of Tiamat upon the separation of heaven and earth cannot endure the strength of the light and were destroyed. Now, you guys might have heard the name Tiamat before, so we'll touch on Zecharia Sitchin's work. He says that the path of Marduk, which later became known as Nibiru, took him towards the giants Saturn and Jupiter. And as Nibiru approached and their massive gravitational pulls bent his orbit drastically inward, forcing his path to be aimed directly at Tiamat. The gravitational pulls of the two giants also caused 3 more chunks of Marduk, or Nibiru, to be pulled from his body. They too became satellites to encircle Marduk as he, with his now 7 satellites, moved toward Tiamat with her 11 satellites. Now, according to Sitchin, the whole solar system used to rotate the other way, and I'm not going to go too deep into him because there is a lot of information out there available on him. I will leave one link in the description box for you guys, but there's a ton of info out there on him. I'm trying to bring things that are a little harder to find. So let's move on to the Aztecs. They say the creation of the universe was scarcely terminated when Tangora, who delighted in doing evil, set fire to the highest heaven, seeking thus to destroy everything. But fortunately, the fire was seen spreading by Tamarua and Raunaku, who quickly ascended from the earth and extinguished the flames. Now, according to that, someone or something ascended up from the earth. So I do still think that there have been higher beings than human beings here on Earth in the past. And I would say the more distant future, the more common it was. And that's just my opinion on things. But thousands of miles away, in the account of creation from Tahiti, a certain Pani known also addresses the god Tangora, using the same name as the Aztecs over in Mexico, concerning the latter's kindling of the sky, and says, "O wonder-working spirit, what is the fire taking hold of the sky? Extinguish it." So both cultures use the name Tangora for something up in the sky, but Raunuku, however you say his name, was someone or something from the earth that ascended up. The Aztec Chronicle also cited that a rain of fire from heaven descended over the world long after the destructive wind encountered earlier. Quote, "When these years were over, Quetzalcoatl sent down a rain of fire from heaven and deprived Atla," I'm just abbreviating, these Aztec names are very difficult, "deprived Atlanta of being the sun and made his wife Chakti the sun in his place." So they're talking about the heavenly bodies switching roles there. Atla, with the first same four letters as Atlas, the Greek god that held up the sky, was deprived of being the sun, and then Chakti took his place as the sun. This is not the first time I've heard that the moon was the first sun and that it was responsible for scorching the earth, but I can't find that reference at the moment. Perhaps more often than not, a celestial agent, a planet, star, or comet, or a former sun is identified as the initiator of the world-ravaging conflagration, either due to a close flyby or direct fall. A Babylonian epic relates how the god Era, whose name means to scorch or char, and who, boasting, identified himself with Gira, the god of fire, set much of the world ablaze. He is quoted as ranting, "I shall finish off the land and count it as ruins. I shall devastate cities and make of them a wilderness. I shall destroy mountains and fell their cattle. I shall stir up oceans and destroy their produce. I shall dig out reed thickets and graves, and I shall burn them like Gera. I shall fell people, and I shall leave no life. From city to city I shall seize the one who governs. I shall let a rogue sit down in the dwelling of princes." Such was the way in which, quote, "Era became angry and set his face towards overwhelming countries and destroying their people," unquote. Although the section in the epic in which Era would have substantiated these promises is missing, its existence is inferred from the continuation of the text, in which Era's assistant, Fire, is seen to calm him down. Quote, "Lord Era, why have you planned evil for the gods? You have plotted to overthrow countries and to destroy their people." In that same text, identifies Era as the fox star, the twinkling of which signifies Era's anger. Now, I wonder if the fox star is the same as Pliny's dog star. Also, the Tawana of Washington State blamed a lethal outburst of heat in the past on the moon, which had been intended by the creator to be the sun. In the morning it rose, but it shone too hot and caused the water to boil, killing the fish and also many animals on land, and did much damage generally. So then he made the sun as it is now to rule the day, and condemned the moon to shine at night. So there we go, another instance of the moon being the first sun. Now let's talk about ancient Greek literature. Plato's statement was, "Once upon a time, Phaethon, son of Helios, yoked his father's chariot, and because he was unable to drive it along the course taken by his father, burned up all that was upon the earth, and himself perished by a thunderbolt." Ovid's account is perhaps the most graphic. The earth burst into flames, the highest parts first, and split into deep cracks, and its moisture all dried up. The meadows are burned to white ashes, the trees are consumed, green leaves and all, and the ripe grain furnishes fuel for its own destruction. Great cities perish with their walls, and the vast conflagration reduces whole nations to ashes. The woods are ablaze with the mountains. Then indeed does Phaethon see the earth aflame on every hand. He cannot endure the mighty heat, and the air he breathes is like the hot breath of a deep furnace. The chariot he feels growing white hot beneath his feet. He can no longer bear the ashes and whirling sparks, and is completely shrouded in the dense hot smoke. In this pitchy darkness, he cannot tell whether he is going or whether he is coming, and is swept along at the will of his flying steeds. So Ovid continues along very eloquently and poetically. I'm just going to give you the highlights here. Libya became a desert. Great cracks yawn everywhere. The seas shrink up. A watery expanse that is now a dry plain. And the mountains which the deep sea had covered before spring forth. So, yeah. It doesn't sound like your average Saturday afternoon now, does it? Now let's jump forward in time all the way up to 1671, and allegedly some of the first people to make contact with the Incas post-Pizarro. Let's start with their histories make mention also of giants who formerly inhabited the promontory St. Helena. Now, I want to also point out that when Napoleon was banished from France, he was banished to St. Helena. Just pointing that out. But they say that each of these giants were 4 times bigger than an ordinary man and fed not only on the greatest sea monsters, but devoured each of them 30 Peruvians at a meal. The stone images of these giants are at this day to be seen not far from Puerto Viejo. They likewise keep for a long time annual feast days on which they lament the loss of the giants. They are lamenting the loss of the giants, which I'm not even going to comment on that right now. But then they say, a youth glittering in glory like the sun descended from heaven and breathed fire, which rending the rocks so terrified the giants that they fled into a deep cave where they were all killed. Now, Cornelius Whitefield, the governor of Puerto Viejo, relates that being stirred up by the report of the aforementioned images caused all the graves to be broke open, in some of which he found bones, which they supposed to be whale bones, had not the skulls manifested to the contrary. So they went and broke open a bunch of giants' graves. Now, I have also heard that some of the first sailors coming to South America spotted giants from the water. They saw them on the beach. I can't remember where that is from, but I know I've heard that.